Hi, everyone. So thank you for joining the project track for talking about ASVS version 5. I am Shanni Prutchi. I am a member of the ASVS working group, and I currently work at CrowdStrike, not on the product team. I sincerely apologize for July 19th, but that was not my fault. I work in services doing incident response preparation, tabletop, and some response. And previously had a role at Bishop Fox doing application security. And I'm here with Ryan, a fellow member of the working group.
Sure, I'll do an intro. I manage an application security testing team at a consultancy from Canada. And obviously, my spare time, I contribute to the ASVS, which is why we're here.
Yep. We, like I mentioned, are on the working group. We are a team of like 5 or 6 people who help contribute to the ASVS. There are a few awesome folks who we will introduce who are not here, who are the leaders of the ASVS project. But most importantly, and as is true for all projects at OWASP, ASVS is an open source project. So we want folks to contribute. And at the end, we're going to show you the multiple ways you can do that. So we're going to introduce a little bit about the ASVS for those of you who may not be familiar with it. Then we're going to talk about the key principles in the new version. And then Ryan will talk about our projected timeline, when we're hoping it will come out, and some calls to action for how you can help move this along. So just some basics about the ASVS. For those who aren't familiar with the acronym, it is the Application Security Verification Standard. It is an open standard for application security, not just for testing against it, but also for developers to kind of have a secure application checklist of sorts. There are 278 or so. I say or so because some controls were found to be redundant and removed or things like that, that are across 14 verification topics. These topics range all the way from like application configuration to threat modeling and design, to access control, to authorization, and all sorts of other stuff. If you are interested, you can look it up on GitHub. It's just OWASP/ASVS on GitHub. And most importantly, there's 3 assurance levels. Each verification standard can meet level 1 and or level 1 just by itself, or level 1, level 2, or level 1, level 2, level 3. Level 1 is the base security that any application should have, right? Like you should have basic access controls, you shouldn't be able to have people putting in cross-site scripting, basic stuff like that. Level 2 is where you have sensitive information come in. So like if you have payment information, anything sensitive should be level 2. And level 3 is high risk and critical applications. So for defense purposes, infrastructure, healthcare, things like that, where you really can't afford for things to go wrong. By definition of version 4.03 is where we are right now. And this may change as part of version 5. Level 1 is almost entirely penetration testable. But you can verify against level 1 solely with pen testing, with the exception of 2 controls surrounding like encryption protocols, and that's acknowledged in the standard. Level 2 and level 3, you can verify with some access to backend systems to review configuration, as well as some design documentation. If that is something you're interested in, let me know, because I've done some separate research on that. But that is how we separate those. So what are the use cases of the ASVS? The 2 primary ones are to develop secure applications, as well as align vendor offerings. But also, it can be a training resource for secure development. So if you are a developer who wants to learn how to do secure coding, or you want to train your team on secure coding and you need some guidance on where to start, what themes to touch on, this is a great resource. It's also a great guide for secure architecture. and secure coding checklist, and when you are procuring software to make sure that the software you are purchasing is secure. So you have a lot of excellent use cases, and we see people also use this internally at their own organizations and really do a lot with it. At Bishop Fox, I had used Chris, who's in the audience and used to be my not boss, he and I used the first chapter of the ASVS in doing architecture assessments and just used that. And so we really see people meld it to their own needs. Awesome. So why are we publishing a 5th version? Well, there's some flaws with it. And as everything else, we need to develop it with the times. The first goal is make it easier to use. There's a lot of text in there right now, and not all of it is necessary. There's some text that needs to be clarified, and there are some requirements that were redundant and needed to get rid of, or that may not be in the most appropriate section for where we are technologically at the current moment. And we also want it to make more readable. So right now, if you look at the ASVS and there's a PDF you can download if you don't want to read it on GitHub, there's like a lot of chunk of text at the beginning of each chapter, and then you get to the requirements. We want to kind of move a lot of that text towards a glossary or an appendix to make it smoother. So there's a few key principles in making it easier to use. First, we want to improve the requirements, and that is with the help of the community. We get a lot of feedback saying, you don't address this security issue, and so can we add it in? So it's added in. Or there's some requirements that don't make sense and that I have read through and be like, I don't know what this means. And like, I ask other people, I don't know what this means. It's like, I don't know what this means either. So clarifying those, and really making a clear balance between like, we want the text to be clear and specific, but we also don't want it to be prescriptive, right? Because we can't tell you use this and this and this encryption algorithm necessarily, because it's applicable to what you're using in your environment, what is necessary in your application. And also, we don't want to quickly become outdated. We don't want to say, like, use this and this algorithm, and then a year from now, that algorithm is no longer secure. So it's more providing like general, but very clear and not wordy requirements. As part of improving requirements, we have 3 new chapters. The first new chapter is web front-end security. Some of the requirements in this chapter are requirements that have existed already and are just shifted to help make organization a little bit better, and some are new. We have a new chapter for OAuth 2. These are, I believe, almost entirely new verification requirements. And WebRTC, that was contributed by a wonderful, I think, Italian man named Sergio. I don't know if he's in the audience. Motis and Sandro. You're right, Sandro. Yes. Sorry, some 2 wonderful guys who contributed, and because that is something that we definitely were in need of. Thank you. We also want an easier level structure. Levels 1 and 2 are very control heavy, and there's not a lot in level 3, understandably, but we want to make sure there's a balance. We also want to make a lower barrier to entry, that level 1 we feel has some things that might be more appropriate for level 2, that like not every single application needs these requirements. And also to have a better definition of like why something is level 1 versus level 2 and level 2 versus level 3. Because there's really unclear definition of like what is what, other than the fact that like level 1 is entirely pen testable, and also every application should have level 1, and those can be at odds with each other. This is not finalized. Like, this is something that we are discussing because it is a point of contention, but we don't know if we're doing anything about this. So if you have thoughts on it, hit us up on GitHub, please. Also, our mappings. Right now, we have CWE mappings as well as some of the proactive control mappings, and they're really messy. Sometimes multiple CWEs apply to a single verification requirement, and we only list one. It is not that great of a mapping. Josh Grossman, who is one of the leaders of this project, he was the one who wanted to do proactive controls mapping. So if you have complaints, we're not the ones responsible. You can tweet it at Josh. I think we have his Twitter on the last slide, maybe. Lovely British man, but blame him for that one. It's also a maintenance burden, right? Because when mappings are updated, if there's new CWEs that are added, it just means we have to do more work on our side. So we're actually looking to potentially shift to use OWASP CRE, which is going to act as like a mapping with a bunch of other stuff. And that way there will be like cross-standard mapping, and that will be easier for us to manage because we won't have to kind of do maintenance on the back end when new CWEs or something like that are introduced. That becomes the responsibility of CRE. So we're kind of transferring risk there. And also right now it clogs up the requirements list. We are considering moving it to a later part of the document or finding a smoother way to include it. And also streamlining the main document. We want to make it easily readable with all of the requirements in one place, bless you. So we want to be able to get to the requirements faster and minimize the text that's in chapters. You know, don't let it get too fluffy, and references and stuff like that can go to the appendix, where if you're interested in just that chapter, you can go to the appendix, right? Because a lot of people don't read through the whole ASVS. Raise your hand if you've read through the entire ASVS. Raise your hand if you've only read a few chapters, the ones that you needed. Yeah, I've read through the ASVS like probably 5 times because I had to, but most of the times I just go to the chapters I need to reference. And that's what we want to do. We want to make it easier to get the information you need now. So we have a timeline. When are we expecting all of this? Is this me or you?
We can go either way. I just switched on. I'm good to go.
So when are we expecting all of this newness?
Well, as with, I think, any volunteer-driven project, you know, there's always uncertainty. Things can go different directions, right? There could be an influx of new contributors who take many issues with how things are evolving, and that can cause setbacks. So I think, you know, projecting really tight and specific timelines is always, I don't want to, you know, set them in stone, right? But there's a lot of major rework that's happening right now. There's a huge effort ongoing presently, and there's a plan to release like a candidate version 5 before the end of the year. And I think that's probably very likely to happen, but you know, we'll see. That's the plan. Now, Shanni took my question because I was also going to ask how many people have actually read the ASVS top to bottom. And for those of you who haven't, who are in application security, I'd actually recommend it. Like you probably will learn something. There are a lot of very interesting and thoughtful requirements that have been derived from other security standards and expertise of the contributors and so on. But obviously now I'm going to talk about the calls to action. So what we ask of the community and how you interact with and participate in the ASVS. And so the first obvious one is, as I mentioned, and you know, as it's known, the ASVS is a community-driven project through OWASP. And right now, you know, the primary contributors consist of the project leaders, the working group, community manager who is here. Matthew Shoutout, he's in the back, I think. Yeah. And of course, there are many other contributors as well who are regularly going into the ASVS on GitHub and adding their, providing their opinions and their expertise. And it's really great to see. It's really great when that happens. But a lot of the regular contributors, like there aren't that many. And so, you know, it's like one of those GitHub projects that's really prone to like XZ style attacks, right? I could get all my friends together and we could go to the GitHub and we could say, we could try to push through a requirement for daily password rotation. You know, that won't happen, but these projects thrive when more people with more diverse perspectives and expertise participate. And additionally, you know, it also helps against a very small number of people having very strong opinions on certain issues, from forcing their opinions onto the standard. Not that, you know, not that that's how it goes, but it's a really great protection mechanism against having bias in these types of standards, to have more people broadly across the community participate. And it's very easy to. And the first thing that I recommend to everyone that is another resource that you can learn from besides just reading the standard, which again, highly recommend. But you can go to the GitHub. You see that I keep some pages bookmarked. I have even more of the ASVS pages bookmarked. It's really handy to quickly get to the ASVS, different versions and different locations. But what I recommend is watch it. You need obviously a GitHub account, and watch the issues and have those go to your email inbox and filter them. So have a little ASVS folder, and you'll see all the discussions come in, and there are a ton of them. But if you have specific areas of interest, you can filter for those. You can just look at what interests you. The discussions are super interesting, right? Because it's people who are application security professionals or people who have a passion for application security who are coming in there, and they're voicing their opinion on different topics. And beyond just the requirements, I have learned a lot from reading the discussions, and for my own testing team in Canada at our consultancy, we have developed some standards around just some of the discussions that have occurred. It's really valuable information, and sometimes it can help settle internal debates, right? If you're having internal debates on your team, sometimes someone will make a good point on the ASVS discussion boards in GitHub, right? The issues. And you can go there, not that it's the kind of de facto source of truth, but it can be very helpful to see the opinions of other people on a lot of these requirements. And so this is what it looks like for me, right? This is my Gmail inbox. Obviously, I have a specific label applied to these, and also anytime I see OAuth, I search and delete those. But for the most part, I try to keep up with the discussions on the requirements. I did this long before I ever participated with the ASVS, before I ever contributed anything. I just watched it because it was a very valuable source of information. So again, I highly recommend it, and it's a great way to get started because you see what the discussions are, you can see where the debates are, what the contentious issues are, and you can see also just some issues not get a lot of attention, and maybe that's an opportunity for you to contribute to if that's an area where you are a subject matter expert, or maybe you just have a really keen interest in it. And this is the workflow for that. It's very simple. You see an issue, and so this is one of the first times I contributed. I was like, oh, WebSockets. I know a lot about WebSockets. There wasn't a lot of activity on it, and so I went in with my own opinions and kept the discussion going, and eventually that resulted in a pull request, and now there's a requirement that I think is well designed around WebSockets. I think this was authenticating like a WebSocket channel. It's as easy as that, right? And everyone is so helpful and nice with the ASVS for the most part. And so if you contribute, everyone's going to appreciate it, and you'll get all these nice comments like this one from Josh. Thanks for the feedback. And the issues are also well organized in the GitHub, and they're tagged according to the section and whether discussion is ongoing, whether they're looking for community feedback or something else. So you can just go to the Issues tab, and you can search for things of interest. And this is actually another area where if you're working in application security and you're trying to understand the broader context around either ASVS requirements or just like a topic in general, go to the Issues tab, delete the is open, and just search for the topic of interest. And you're going to see a ton of discussion probably over what interests you. That's historical, and it may help you, come to a decision for yourself or for your team or whatever. So highly recommend that. Also a great way to get started. Again, especially if you have a specific area of interest or expertise, you can go to the issues, you can search, or you can just scroll. You just browse through it, go page to page. It's super easy. There's a lot of issues. Yeah, there's a lot of issues. Yeah, a lot of them, I think the vast majority, by far, are solved, right, or closed. Right? So there are relatively few open issues, but it still feels like many. And there are more coming for sure. Of course, the other way that you can support the standard is financially. If you have an organization that uses it, it would be a great opportunity to ask them maybe to be a sponsor. This, of course, has been cited in probably every open source project slides ever. I'm sure we're all familiar with that, but shout out, of course, to our sponsors. The ASVS project does have sponsors. We would like to thank them for their support, obviously, and it could be you and your organization as well, right? And you can support the ASVS project for as little as $10,000 or maybe even less if something else suits you. It's up to you to decide as the supporters. There are other ways to do it too, right? Funding, obviously. The funding goes towards travel assistance for project meetings. It goes towards other services and fees and costs and et cetera. Personally, I don't manage the finances, so I actually don't have a lot of insight into it. But I know that it's all going towards a good cause because it's a great project. And that's it from the support side. Get involved, provide your technical expertise, provide funding if you're at a company that uses it. And that's it. So thanks everyone for coming to the talk. You can reach us, obviously, at the emails here, and we're also here in person to answer questions or to chat afterwards.
And we will take any hate comments on the ASVS. And I will say, a lot of us who contribute to the ASVS have started doing it out of, I don't want to say anger or frustration, but feeling that there is something missing or that there is a misunderstanding of things, right? Like, I started getting involved as a project out of hatred, not for the ASVS, but because there are organizations that say, oh, we can certify with pen testing up to a level 2. And I'm like, well, only level 1 is by definition pen testable. And so I ended up saying, here's the access you need to verify every single verification requirement in the ASVS because I just had to get it out of my system.
Everyone wants to be right.
Yeah, I wanted to be right. And so at that point, once you it's like Beetlejuice, once you read it in its entirety 3 times, you automatically become part of the working group. So yeah. Yeah. So join, if it's just making 1 or 2 pull requests or just looking at the issues, do that. And if you are an employer and you have employees who use this, another way you can contribute is donating their time, right? You don't need to give us straight money. If you can let your employees spend an hour or 2 a week contributing to the ASVS, that is immensely useful because a lot of us do this after we finish our day jobs.
Bonus, it's free training, and you get people going back in the discussions, providing their own input and feedback. It's like having a mentor built into the project, right?
Exactly. And I've personally found that some of the leaders of the project, one of the most recent tasks I took on was helping improve the access controls chapter. And I took on one of the leaders of the project. I asked him if he could help me in that effort and reviewing things before I presented them to the working group. And that was one of the most helpful things I've had in my life. And having someone who has been in the field for longer than I've been alive probably, be able to give me feedback was in kind of a one-on-one environment has also been really valuable. So there's so much more that you can get out of this than just contributing to something useful. I've found it's really great just for increasing your own understanding, and especially if you're in your early career doing that, but also a way of giving back to the community in the process. So
feel free to shoot those hands up if anyone has any questions, or we can just keep chatting up here.
So you mentioned about level 1 controls being pen testable. I'm curious if there's any discussions around defining what's opaque pen testable versus semi-transparent versus transparent, and going to that level of clarification on the controls, so you can say, hey, the level 2 controls and level 3 controls are pen testable under these conditions.
I'll say broadly that there's ongoing work in that area, and there's probably going to be some evolution into V5.
But I do think that some of the level discussion is more surrounding how appropriate it is to apply versus testability. But you can always ask about that, and I will support you on that one, since I have a vendetta. So I will take that on as a personal project. Yeah.
So it's a number of requirements, right? Split in different chapters. But of course, the requirements don't tell you how to actually do things. There are a lot of details that are simply not part of ASVS. Where do these details go? I heard there's the cheat sheets and so on and so forth. Is there mapping? Is there a relationship?
So I believe that one of the things we'd like to do is to reference for each chapter, here's an appropriate cheat sheet or here's the appropriate resources. That is what some people would say is a downside of the ASVS, that it's not prescriptive. But that is also what we are avoiding, right? Because that becomes very difficult to maintain. And also, if I now need to prescribe this for a bunch of different frameworks and languages, that goes way beyond just the time capabilities, and I'd say even the knowledge capacities of the group. And so there are discussions on, especially with the CRE mapping, that if that can map to proactive controls and things like that. But that is some of the feedback that we've gotten, and unfortunately it's that's not really something we're seeking to do with the project, but we're at least trying to link to cheat sheets or some other resources that you can follow. But
the point at which you have a document that's requirements, how to test for them, how to implement them, it's basically the all application security in one document, and that would be massive. But I will say that related project, the MASVS, they actually do a really great job linking to the MASTG. So there's a really strong and I think well designed and deployed linkage between the requirements and the testing process. And I assume that we'll kind of get there eventually with the ASVS and having good supporting related projects for both testing and for implementation. But it's the ASVS is a little bit, it's quite a bit bigger than the MASVS by comparison. So there's been a lot of rapid change. So it's, I think especially being in flux so often makes it very challenging to provide a coherent mapping to other standards and so on. But I have to hope eventually it's going. We're going to have a bigger picture of connected coverage across OWASP projects.
Thank you. It used to be tied into the OWASP testing guide, I thought. The ASVS used to have that. You could map certain controls to a specific test. And hopefully, as part of the OpenCRE, again, you can map that to the OWASP testing guide as well for the application piece too.
Yeah, I think that's the ideal immediate outcome, right? Is having that linkage capability, even if it's not direct.
any other questions? Complaints? Yeah? Oh no, complaint.
My coworker Beneath out there and we're using ASVS to do assessments of applications at our company, and I had questions around mapping, so I think you've addressed that pretty fully. But also, in addition to that, one of our weak points is being able to filter the ASVS down per application. So I want it to be tailored to that application, right? Without having, I tell the team they need to go ahead and use it to create their own tailored checklist, right? Following the assessment. But for now, I'm doing my best to get to know their application, tailor, filter it down the best I can. I end up with a lot of not applicable controls for that assessment, right? Is there anything in the OWASP projects that I should be looking for?
I don't think that's in the timeline, but that's a really good idea.
It's actually pretty common. A lot of app teams will pare it down for their app or organizational requirements. I feel like I've heard that as a recommendation from some of the ASVS crew broadly. In terms of process for doing that, I think the reality is right now that it requires manually going through the requirements and determining what's appropriate, and depending on how tightly it's integrated into your organizational requirements, coming up with exceptions for each of those. But certainly there is the cognizance within the project for the inapplicability of a lot of requirements in certain situations. But I think that the reality, again, of having one single like standard of requirements is it'll never fit every odd like application, but it's, you know, it's always the project is always kind of moving to try and do it better anyways.
So you're not aware of any forms that are being attempted now to fill out maybe a set of questions, a form to kind of that works on filtering that down?
Not within the project formally. I wouldn't be surprised if someone had like done that independently within their own organization, but
There are some like ASVS like automation projects, but I haven't really looked. I work exclusively from an offensive security point of view, so I've never concerned myself with those projects so much. But there are some projects I think kind of in that space.
I'll upload what I come up with then.
Well, and I was going to say too that we looked at it from an organizational perspective, and because we're a software vendor, and so we looked at what our customers were asking, what we should be doing, what we were already doing, and we actually found we sat between level 2 and level 3 controls. So we had to go through and say this is what we need to do as an organization. That went into our security program, so it became security requirements that all of our teams had to implement. It's tied into our threat modeling as well. So if a control pops up that is tied to ASVS, that is part of the threat model activity, that again ties into the requirements, countermeasures are listed for what they need to do to help fix it. And then the other part that I really like is that we tie that in kind of like what you were saying on the security assessment side. So we have the requirements, and let's go validate the requirements with pen testing, whether that's internal or external or whatever.
Well, here's an example where level doesn't handle that. So WebSockets, my app doesn't use WebSockets. Filter that out. That's kind of what I'm getting at for filtering.
Yeah.
kind of filter by technology usage.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good idea though.
Probably might make sense to, you know, conceive of the type of project you want to see and then wait for the version 5 release and you know, tackle that there. And I'm sure there's other interest across the community for those types of things, because yeah, I've heard that a few times of like processes to filter requirements and how it can be, you know, a bit tedious, obviously.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir.
On that topic, I think somewhere in the ASVS document or some related document, I saw the recommendation of forking that and then removing things. It's a
Yep.
manual process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure it can work, but yeah, it's nice to have tools.
I'm
Yeah.
sure someone's using an LLM to be like, which of these do I really need? You know.
You know
like
what?
Just
Following
What?
on the keynote from this morning, we can make an ASVS filter bot.
the filter bot.
Keynote for next year. Yeah.
As you release 5.0, is there any plans to have like a crosswalk from run 4.0.1?
Yes.
Is there like a, hey, this one change?
Yes.
Yep.
Is there a plan to release that?
There is. Yeah.
Awesome.
So right now, if you go, you can already see the 5.0 in GitHub as it is being expanded. You just go to our GitHub and you see like v5.0, and you can see that, right? This is entirely transparent. And for anything that's been changed, there will be in brackets says modified. It would be like grammar if it was just grammar, or if it was moved from a section, it will be like moved from whatever. And then if it's like a net new, it will just say added. And that's in the text itself. You don't need to like go and look at the Git history or anything like that. So there is that. And what I will say is before v5 like gets published, it is going to be up for community review. Again, it's like always up for community review as an open source project, but it will be like extra up for community review of like, you know.
People will be yelling it more.
Exactly, like, you know, like speak now or forever hold your peace unless, you know, until
This is your last
the
chance.
next time we update. And, you know, that you can just, there is always the cutting edge that remains on GitHub. Yep.
So as you move some to other sections, I'm assuming it's going to change like the control number?
No. Oh, for v5 it might.
Yes.
Yeah.
Will that like bump all the other ones up so it kind of change all the numbers?
There will probably be many movements by the time v5 is released.
And we can discuss into, I don't know what are the plans to like track the movement, if we'll publish a guide that allows for tracking, but we
It'll
can
be there.
discuss
There are
that,
enough
yeah.
people who like require that. Like I will require that in like remapping findings that we use internally. So
Yeah, because we put ours in our GRC system, and that, those are controls that we like run. So we'll either, whether you provide it or not, we'll have to do that. It'd just be great if you provided it as part of the project.
something
Yeah.
is coming for sure. All right, I think that's it for time.
Yep.
So thanks everyone.
Thanks all.